Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Thursday, May 26th edition of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Obviously, I'm not Ben, and neither are they. But we are here. We're trying to tell me shit. So happy, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Like I was saying, my name is Anoa Changa. I am your guest host for the evening. Ben had some family stuff to take care of, and he has left you in our capable hands. And I'm joined with a panel of awesomeness. I'm just surrounded by so many great people tonight. So starting with Nick, if everybody can introduce themselves.
I'm Nick. I know you guys have seen me before on the show. I'm just here to be on the panel.
Richard.
Go ahead, next person.
Yeah, and Richard, some of you may be joining us from just coming from Project Sanity, same guy, and just here to help out, and I'm just thankful for the opportunity to have a conversation with these wonderfully fine folks.
Awesome. And Solomon.
Hello, everybody. Long time no see. Just wanted to slide in here and join the discussion for a little bit, see how it goes. I think we have some interesting topics to talk about, so let's get to it.
Awesome. So just a little, because I can't let this go without touching on some of her stuff. So Dr. Q, she hooks up every show. She hooks up this awesome sheet for us, right? Because it's hard to do this stuff, and it's a great team at Progressive Army. Shout out to everybody at ProgressiveArmy.com, everyone who helps with the Benjamin Dixon Show. So there's some really interesting just news stories that have just been popped up earlier today. There is, just started a little bit with some international news, the Brazil impeachment coup situation. Basically, Brazilian officials are not happy with how the coup is being portrayed outside of Brazil, and they're seeking to control the discourse through their diplomats abroad. They're in damage control mode, basically. For those, we've talked about it across the various shows before. The democratically elected president has been essentially ousted, and her interim replacements are way more corrupt than what she's alleged to be. And her very diverse, cabinet reflective of the country has been replaced by all white men. So it's a very interesting story that's unfolding. And from some of the other news stories that I've read about, it's not playing very well in South America. And it just seems like there's some suggestion that there is support from the U.S. government, while not blatant and specific. There's allegedly some behind-the-scenes support for this change that has taken place. Next, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me get in on that. Imagine that we have a Democratic president, or we have the Democrats in power here in the United States, and something happens, and they impeach the president. Instead of putting in the next person or somebody from the same party to replace them as president, imagine that you put in somebody that's lost to that person, 4, 5, 6 times in a row in elections. Like, they can never win election, and yet somehow they became president. That is how serious what is going on in South America is right now. And if you're familiar with what's been going on in South America and its history with the United States after the Monroe Doctrine, it is not... It's not necessarily a conspiracy theory or like just completely fabricated that the United States is involved, just like they had a special involvement in the coup in Honduras. So I wouldn't at all be surprised that this is just right out of the CIA's handbook.
And that's an excellent point too, right? Like the fact that, like you said, this is someone who could not cut the snuff basically on his own. They had to orchestrate this coup, this impeachment process, to be able to get put in power when they weren't able to do so, through legitimate means. Brazil's democracy is approximately 30, 35 years old, was formerly a military dictatorship. So, I mean, this is really, the fact that this is happening, Nick is exactly right. It really has multiple implications beyond just one allegedly corrupt leader. Another thing that just popped up is United Nations envoys have been warned. There's basically been an epidemic of activist murders. 116 environmental defenders were killed in 2014, according to the NGO Global Witness, and 40% of them were indigenous. And there's also been some reports and testimonies that have been made available to the public regarding Saudi royals and what they have known or could have known about the 9/11 attacks. This, of course, surrounds the controversy of the 28 classified pages on the initial reports of possible Saudi government involvement. As I'm not sure if people may be familiar, there has been a push for there to be able to sue to hold the Saudi government responsible for issues arising out of the 9/11 attacks, considering, the fact that most of the, for lack of a better word, terrorists involved, most of the people who carried out the attacks were Saudi nationals. And then, again, these classified pages, the lack of information provided seems to suggest that there was greater involvement, or at least greater knowledge, on behalf of the Saudi government than made publicly available. So that's just a little bit of international news.
I was just going to hop in on there. I know back when this was a big story during the 9/11 times, one of the things, or when the commission report was coming out, that one of the things that came around was flying a lot of the Bin Laden family out of the United States afterwards, which just, I think, helps lead people to believe that perhaps there was more going on there than we know, and that there's probably more information in those 28 pages, and that it seems that Saudi Arabia being involved isn't as far-fetched and tinfoil-y as people might have made it sound, 10 years ago.
Right, exactly. Especially when by the time the report came out, mid-2000s, whenever the report finally came out, and the fact that those pages, it wasn't several different things, but it was specifically, honed in and related to the Saudi government and Saudi royals, like that in of itself, and the close relationship with the Saudi royal family and the Saudi government, not just by, current President Obama, former President Bush, but also about the Clintons, right? Like it does raise, these are close personal relationships that people have, and it does raise, like you said, it does go beyond the tinfoil hat land, and we've seen, just even going back to what Nick was talking about with South America, we've seen examples of how our government has colluded to conspire and keep information hidden, or the lengths they would go to. So why not this too, right? Yeah. So turning.
I'd say just one more thing about international news, just going back to Brazil for a second, because I kind of missed the discussion, was the center-right or right-leaning parties take over. I don't understand how they plan on actually sustaining it when Brazil has, through the entire life of its democracy, the leftist party has maintained complete control democratically. The right-wing party has always been on the back foot because Brazil, just ideologically as a population, is not a right-leaning country. So I don't understand what the long-term goal of this coup is. Was it just opportunists that thought they could oust the president and make her unpopular? She may be personally unpopular, but the ideology of the party is not unpopular. It's the corruption that both parties are embroiled in. So I don't know when the next election cycle is for Brazil, but I don't understand how long-term they have any way of convincing the Brazilian people to vote for this right-leaning party, when what I've seen so far is that the only complaints people have had on the left-leaning party in Brazil is that it's not left-wing enough, and there has been protests about them being too centrist or not supporting the poor enough. And so I don't understand how how they could sustain this for very long.
Well, It's really not about sustainability. What they want to do is they want to quickly and easily get their people in and put in place a lot of policies or set forth a lot of programs for like businesses to extract resources or not have to obey environmental laws. They want to get as much of that stuff in place as possible in a short period of time. And once that stuff starts rolling, it's really hard to untangle it, undo it. They can sign trade deals. They can fundamentally rewrite government. They can sell off the public lands. I mean, once it's sold, you can't get it back through the democratic process. Like, there's a lot of damage that you can do in the short term that it can't just be easily undone.
And just on that note, some of the things that they might be doing, like you mentioned, taking land or doing things like that, just a reminder that the Olympics are supposed to be in Brazil in 70 days.
Yes, this summer. Yes.
70 days from now. They're dealing with what could be called a coup, and they're about to host the Olympic Games with all the other nations there. 70 days. Just over.
Well, there's already been so many other issues ahead of, not even including this, right? Like there have been issues with just clearing out people from basically their space to make way for the Olympics. There's been a rise of police crackdowns and actually killings of predominantly black youth in Brazil as well. So there is like a whole host of issues bubbling up, like you point out, a mere 2 months before this year's Olympics is set to take place, and it's kind of insane that this is happening, in the middle of that process as well. Like, how are they going to pull it all together? I don't know. Like, it's just, I don't know. I'm just like trying to walk through it in my head. Like, you're right. Like, they're going through this impeachment process. They're basically staging a coup. And I read something, and somebody, I don't know if you guys know any more about this. I read this maybe like a week or so ago about the military was on standby basically, like, because they were going to back up, the removal. And I'm just like, what does that mean? Does that mean that if the military doesn't like what's going on, they're going to step in?
Because is it the military just going to go revert back to the pre-democracy state? Because that's the only way I could see is the right wing making a deal with the military, because it's the only way I could see this lasting long term. They'd immediately get ousted in the next election. So I don't really, because they've done nothing to make themselves more popular with the people, and they still have their own corruption allegations to deal with, and being partnered with the military who can just overturn whole laws and make those corruption dealings and the whole elections non-valid seems like, for them, where coups happen all the time only 30 years ago, maybe that's the option they see.
It's just like I said, they're going to basically, sell off the public lands, privatize. They're going to do things of that nature that are hard to untangle, in a short period of time. Even if they lose the election, they already did the damage. They did what they can to do. They're going to privatize the water, deregulate the telecom. Who knows what else they'll possibly do, that they can just do, and it won't matter if people come and vote them out, because once the lands are sold, you can't get them back.
And that they're doing it with as close to the world watching as Brazil's probably going to get.
Well, I really don't think that, amongst the elite that run the world, I really don't think that that's a big issue.
Yeah, but I think the rise in, protests and outrage that's been going on, I agree with that, but we'll see, because people aren't happy. And from what I've read, other South American leaders are not happy about this, and it puts Brazil in a tough position, which is the point of this article that Q pulled from me earlier, that they're really trying to spin this, away from the criticism as if it's a legitimate process that's going on, and documentation, the transcripts that came out a couple of days ago suggest otherwise, that this has actually been orchestrated to undermine the former president and her administration.
Yeah, because this tips the whole balance of the continent to the right, basically, from the entire. There's not really a strong right-wing sentiment in South America at all, and it's a kind of a historic reversal from the right-wing colonial era. Ever since then, they've switched very hard to the left and have stayed there. Maybe too far. Maybe they've had their problems with that. Venezuela being one of them, although it's mostly due to oil. But they've stayed. All of South America has a very leftist tradition. So to see this coup happen in its largest and most, both in terms of population and size and economic power, suddenly switch to the right like this is going to cause long-term problems.
I, again, I don't. I'm not sure. Here's why I'll say I'm not sure though. South America, although under democracy they have a left-wing tradition, that's only because they come from a right-wing authoritarian tradition that was put in place before that, right? So these left-wing movements are more like a backlash against the authoritarian regimes that were to the right and so forth before. So it's really just more of the same, so to speak. It's not necessarily like a big twist. Like in South America in particular, you can go country by country. They've switched. They've had democracy, dictatorship, back and forth, for the last 120 years, just about. And
But yeah,
that's just the game.
That's Brazil. Like Brazil was a military dictatorship up until the early 80s or so. I remember when I went to Brazil, my house sister, I think she may have been born like at the tail end of the military dictatorship. So that's what I'm saying. Like the current democracy is about as old as I am, maybe a little younger. So it's still, it's still fragile. There's still change and stuff being made, and so this is, it's just something definitely to watch and pay more attention to. So, kind of looking a little domestically. So our boy Bernie, there's been a lot of criticism about Bernie Sanders not fundraising for the party. He's not supporting down ballot candidates. He only cares about himself. It's only revolution when it's about getting him elected. Well, as we've already talked about, he came out some weeks back and he endorsed Lucy Flores, Zephyr Teachout, and Pramila Jayapal. Then he endorsed Tim Canova, and then he endorsed 8 down ballot state Senate candidates, or they're not all Senate, but they're state level candidates. And there's a large number of women and people of color who have been supported and endorsed now by Senator Bernie Sanders. Pretty cool. But today it was announced that he is now fundraising and he has endorsed Russ Feingold. That's like huge. I just was reading an article, I think it was last night, about how he is like, Russ Feingold is like the one person that the Koch brothers do not want back in Congress. And then to see this morning that Bernie Sanders is now fundraising and supporting, endorsing him. And I don't know, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, Russ didn't endorse Bernie, right? Like either he was neutral or he endorsed Hillary. I can't remember which one it is.
He was neutral for a while.
Either he's neutral or he endorsed Hillary. One or the other. I can't remember. Somebody can correct me. But the fact that there is no quid pro quo with these. It's great that Bernie has stood by some of the candidates, at least, that stuck their neck out. Like Justin Bamberg from South Carolina was on that list of 8. Was on that list of the 8. And people, especially in some places like South Carolina, how rough that was for the Sanders campaign. People really stuck their necks out on the line to stand with him. So it's good to see that he's getting the memo about the people that have been standing there, that have been working hard, and he's willing to put his name on the line. I don't know what you guys think about that, but when I saw the email this morning, I was like, all right, this is good stuff.
Yeah,
it's like challenge.
Alex Law in New Jersey and Jesse T. Smith in Alabama.
There's still so many more people he needs to name. Yes, but
yeah.
Hopefully there's another round coming out ahead of the New Jersey. Jesse Smith in Alabama is awesome. I got to meet him when he was here for the Bernie rally at the Fox. Alex has been on the show several times. There's Alex Singer in Nevada as well. Alex Singer in Nevada, who we've missed a couple of times trying to get on with technical issues and stuff, just actually picked up an endorsement from the Clark County, I think it's the Black Dem Committee.
Yes, the Black Democratic Caucus. Yeah.
The Black Caucus, yes. The Clark County Black Democratic Caucus, so that's the main county around Nevada. So that's a big deal. That's pretty huge. They also endorsed Bernie Sanders. There's a long list of people who they probably need to just vet everybody real quick and go down. You just need to send out an email with that long list. But what was good, I think the Alex's and Eloy, who was on before, they were on another list that I saw from Act Blue of people that they're bundling together and trying to help fundraise for. So it seems like there are multiple efforts out there. I did learn about, I think, Solomon, you've worked with this a little bit, Grassroots Select, which has been trying to kind of connect and activate 2016 candidates the best way they can possible. So there's a lot going on. It would be great to get that birdie stamp on some more people because it just helps raise awareness, but it also puts credence behind his notion of building this revolution, right? But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting when I saw that this morning in my email. Speaking of emails, now we'll get to her emails. We'll get to the emails in a minute.
I would just say about Grassroots Select, just a quick thing people don't know is that, yeah, we did talk to them, and that we still learn about so many more candidates that we wish we had learned more about. Like Alex Law in one of his AMAs talked about a friend of his, Jim Keaty, who's running in the district right next to him, I believe District 2. He's the guy who was the governor, I forgot the governor of New Jersey, what's his name? Chris Christie. He's the guy who's famous for getting yelled at by Chris Christie telling him to shut up during the Hurricane Sandy relief, and his focus is on bringing in more national federal money for Hurricane Sandy relief because that district is a coastal district that's still completely devastated and hasn't recovered yet, and running a very progressive anti-Chris Christie campaign, and that's just one of the many campaigns across the country that we still find out about people running all over. So definitely check it out, research it. We have a few at senatorDemocrats.org, and we're still getting entries from all over the country for people running, because a lot of primaries don't go till after the convention. Like Tim Canova's primary isn't until I think August. Something I didn't even know could happen.
Yeah, it's August 30th is Tim Canova's convention. And then there's some other, the Missouri ones are in early August. However, Jersey's coming up. The Jersey ones are the day of the primary. They're June 7th. So Alex Law, Peter Jacobs, Eloy Delgado, all those folks, they are June 7th, just like the presidential
California
race
as well, I think, too, right?
I think California is the same. I think California is the same. So I think Erin Schroeder, young woman out in California who another person I have not gotten to get to before June 7th. But there's a lot going on. And so, yeah. And, David just reminded me that Justin Holstenbeck, who's been on the show a few times from down here in Georgia, up in Cobb County, he won his race. He's the official Democratic nominee for his House race down here, which would be good. He's in a strongly Republican district, and if they can flip it, that would be, one for the Georgia House. There's a lot going on down here in Georgia. There's probably a lot going on in you guys in parties, but the Democratic Party here is like silently, well, not even silently, it's kind of imploding here. And, there's all this brave face and we're Democrats and real Democrats, this, that, and the other, but there's some really scandalous, deceitful stuff starting to come to the surface. So if you guys just look out for the link on Twitter, check out Down South and Dirty on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Some stuff is about to hit the fan. Like, it's kind of wild. The opportunity, basically, the middle Georgia Democrats, the middle of the state, the mid-Georgia Democrats are basically fed up with the party and are threatening to leave. So, yeah, it's a lot going on.
Is there a candidate for Senate in Georgia yet? I remember they were looking for one. They kind of thought about having a banker, but there was no real run. They were just focused on electing Hillary. Is there a candidate yet?
Yes, there is. So the Democratic candidate for Senate for Georgia is Jim Barksdale, who's like some investment banker or something like that. I don't really know. I didn't vote for him, so. And actually, I know Democrats here who are just like, I'm probably not voting for him. He's running against Isaacson, I think. They're like, yeah, we may be voting for Isaacson because at least we know that his constituent services listens to everyone, regardless of party affiliation. I was like, wow, that's wild. Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, Georgia's a mess. When people talk about they go out to turn Georgia purple, Yeah, it's more of a reddish purple if it does go purple. Like,
The polls show Bernie can do it. Like South Carolina and Georgia, North
Bernie
Carolina
can
and Georgia are the two states in the South
Bernie
that
can
can do
do
it.
it. But the existing infrastructure, the existing Democrats here, they cannot do it by themselves. And until they're willing to get off the establishment teat, so to speak, it's not it's not going to be a sustainable change. Like
Yeah,
it's
that was
just
a
not. And like,
conversation I was hoping to have like a long time ago. Is that the state Democratic parties in the South are they? Would I imagine them as was like scrappy underdogs wanting to be like relevant again, hoping? And I think the South Carolina chair seemed really excited
so
during the
South
primary.
Carolina, when we went to South Carolina in the fall for the one town hall that Rachel Maddow hosted, it was that whole process of engaging with them. They were very cordial and nice. I mean, of course, they got grimy by the time their actual primary was happening, but they were very nice. I mean, they do seem very organized, really about their business, really focused on trying to increase the ranks of women and minorities. Like, because we went to a Southern Dem women's meeting too while we were there. So, I mean, I think there is that, but I think when you look at Georgia, when you look at Alabama, I think some of the states, like the parties themselves, are so embroiled, their leadership is so embroiled in their own petty interpolitics that it definitely gets in the way of things. Like the one thing I was talking about last week on Down South with Dirty Stacey show was that there was a Hillary delegate because of personal inside bad blood. There's a Hillary delegate that they targeted to remove her from her delegate position. Now these are all Hillary supporters. They because they don't have that like
Why?
it's just like they have none of us to beat up on, so they turn on each other, and so it's a mess. It really is a mess here, and you would think that because of the stronghold that Republicans have had on Southern houses, that we would really be looking to get things done. Like the one thing Justin talked about when he was on the show was the fact that like flipping his seat, like they're like I don't know if it's like 2 seats. I forget how many seats. Like if they don't win the Democrats don't win like 1 or 2 or 3 extra seats, it's some number. The Republicans are going to have a supermajority and they're going to be able to override the veto, a governor's veto. So it's actually a really serious condition to some extent here, and people are just kind of stuck in this little rabbit hole of their own. But
I would
that's
say the establishment politics is almost like a poison pill. Like you can just keep riding it as long as you want to, but it's really not getting you anywhere. Like it's like almost like a sugar rush or something. Like it's good for a little bit, but long term, it's you're just gonna crash. And I think that's the problem we have all across the South. I'm in the South. I'm in Texas, and the Democratic Party here, oh, it's they're just Republicans, except they're just a little bit better. That's it, and
Yeah,
you really can't support very many of them at all.
I guess in my naivety earlier on, I just thought it was a lack of resources thing that the DNC was not allocating resources to what they saw as a lost cause in the South. But it seems to be a combination of that and just establishment politics and I guess inertia, not really wanting to try very hard in a lot of these states.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in there and add that I know Hillary has been instrumental in being the negotiator between the DNC and a lot of those Southern Democratic parties, wielding a lot of influence coming out of Arkansas and then going beyond that as being part of the Clinton administration and so on and so forth. That down south, a lot of that was the establishment that took place was a lot of the Clinton establishment, and so a lot of those people won races because the Clintons supported them or helped back them in certain places. I find, and I don't know if Noah was disagreeing or.
Oh no! I'm so sorry. My 12-year-old was asking me, and this is just so great but he was asking. He's like, "Can I run the dishwasher?" I apologize. No, you guys will probably end up hearing it in the background if I'm not far from the kitchen. No,
yeah,
go
okay.
ahead.
So, yeah, the impression that I've gotten from some of the people that I've spoken with in the Democratic Party down south is that when they've tried to bump up against the establishment, that's really the feedback that they're getting is like, we can't bite the hand that feeds us. And who else is going to come down here and fight for us and fight to get us resources and do those things if not Clinton? And so like even several of them aren't really enthused about the whole thing, but it's just they're stuck in their circumstances.
Yep, and we're here to change that. We're gonna try at least. Couple other things that happened, just real briefly, then we can get on to debate talk and email. And I'll let you guys pick which one we talk about first. But there was a oh no, this is interesting. I'll talk about this. So 195,000 California voters were registered on Tuesday, and they have registered 1.8 million new so far this year. 42% were registered Tuesday, and more than most were 17 to 25-year-olds. So, it's great. All these new voters have been registered in California. Wonderful. I'm not sure if that is just new voters, if that includes people who are changing their party affiliation, which is also pretty good since California is semi-open or closed, however they call it. If you're in California, you should needed to have been registered as of the 23rd as a Democrat or a non-party preference. But the next big thing is making sure we actually get out the vote, right? It's great. We registered all these people. Woohoo! Wonderful. Now make sure everyone either early votes or gets to the polls. And if you're a non-party preference person, make sure you request a Democratic ballot. Otherwise, you will not be able to vote for Bernie Sanders. And I think that that's something that people started catching on a little later, but in some of the earlier races, folks didn't really understand that it was on us to not only inform people about Bernie Sanders and organize, but also get out the vote in our areas and communities, because a lot of the organizations that normally do get out the vote type stuff, they're not moving until after this is all done. They're not even going to lift a finger. The other thing I just saw earlier today about California might have also been a Bernie email too. Bernie is like within 2%, I think, of Hillary Clinton in a new poll statewide. And one of my friends was telling me in Northern California, where she's at, he actually just inched past her. So whatever everybody's doing out in California, if you're out in California, you have people out in California, keep up the great work. Keep pounding the pavement. Keep raising awareness. If you're organizing students, please make sure that if they are no longer on campus on June 7th, they either early vote. And the best thing for students, early vote. If you're a student, go early vote. If you register whatever you need to do for your mail-in ballot, do whatever you got to do to make sure that you're able to vote properly on June 7th. So let's turn to the main topics of the day. So I'll start out to you guys. We got emails, we got debate.
I wanted to say something about the voting. I was like, since we've been dealing with a lot of these voting issues, I think it's important that everybody realize, hey, perhaps it's time at the convention, if you're a delegate, to get out there and try to promote rules such as open primaries in all states. And here's my reasoning why. There is no reason for anyone to be excluded from voting in any primary other than voting more than one time. What I mean by that is you can't vote for both sides. You should be able to vote one time in one place. And the reason why I say that is the voting process itself is paid for by the taxpayers. The idea that you can tax everybody to pay for voting, but then restrict who actually gets to vote for the candidate, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to do that, then the Democratic Party and people who are registered as Democrats can pay for their own election. But if everybody's going to pay for it, then everybody should be able to vote without all these preconditions. It should just be purely open.
No, we have closed elections because it's our party and we can do what we want to, however we want to, and you don't get to come in here and tell us what we're doing wrong or right. You either just need to be a Dem or not have anything to say about it. That's basically, that's basically the attitude, right? I absolutely agree with you, Nick. I do think that we should just want people to be involved in the process. And this notion that, I think I understand to some extent because we're also talking about who's going to be the leader, who gets to make decisions about what the party platforms and stuff are. So I can understand the protective nature, like when you think about it like, a social club. But this isn't a social club, right? This is something that affects everybody. And like you're saying, Nick, our tax dollars, we all pay into this system, but only a select people want to keep, decision-making authority and power. So, Solomon, I think you were going to say something.
I just have to say just two things. This might just evolve into a rant on 538. I don't know if you guys do that much as I enjoy doing it or watching TOIT do it. But one is that the campaign from the people I talked to in the digital visions in the Sanders campaign, they're quite certain that they're in the lead, that these polls are very underpolling, because California is in a way a lot like Michigan in that there hasn't been a lot of pivotal primaries in California, and so they don't have very good turnout models. for California state Democratic primaries, and they also don't have one specifically for this one when there's been such a giant voter drive to get people out to vote. And so if people do get out to vote, I think it's not going to be a very close race. They're most likely expecting closer to something we saw in Oregon, possibly even more. But the other thing I was going to say is that if that happens, it would close the popular vote a lot, and finally get rid of this argument I keep seeing in 538 and Nate Silver's Twitter, in their Twitter messages and in their articles about Hillary Clinton having 3 million more votes than Bernie Sanders, which is not true to begin with. But just getting rid of that, I want that to go away.
Be able to get anything. I don't know who was. So I don't know who posted the tweet in the Slack earlier, but basically Sean King went kind of ham. Maybe David Grossman might have also responded to 538 to Nate as well, but kind of went ham a little bit about this notion that because they've been very slanted towards Hillary Clinton, even when they've been wrong, right? Like they've been very slanted towards her, and then supposedly caucuses are biased against her and they favor Bernie Sanders. Now, Richard, you're in a caucus state, so maybe you can weigh in on what you think about this. But I mean, that argument doesn't muster when the first two caucuses he lost. I mean, maybe that just means people learned the lessons from some of the issues that arose in Iowa and Nevada and were more organized, right? And made sure, I think Bernie volunteers do better with making sure they're organized, engaged, and involved, you know, at that level. And it takes a lot of commitment to stay there and be active. I don't know. I haven't caucused before, but I know Richard.
I went into it in a little bit more detail on tonight on Project Sanity, so if people want more information, they can go there. But just to give some kind of stuff around the caucus process and what Nick was mentioning about being open and who pays for it. Excuse me. Washington just had the primary, which people saw in the news recently. That is paid for by the state. The caucus is paid for by the party, and that's just for ours particularly, and that's usually kind of how it breaks down in most states, that if they have a primary, it's funded by the state, and then it's also subject to many of the voter regulations and rules that they have. And then caucuses are usually party events, and so then the rules and so forth are determined by the party rather than a state's voting rules. And so in that way, that's why caucuses are actually open. And we saw Republican caucuses that functioned a little bit differently, where it was essentially like a primary, but then there was also like a side room that if you wanted to, you could go in and either try and convince other people to vote your way or be convinced to vote for a certain candidate. I think that is actually probably the model that I think would satisfy people that like caucuses and primaries the most. And I think you could get state funding, and then you could also make that an open process so that anybody could come in, basically go to that room and figure out which side they want to vote for, who they want to vote for, and it would serve the engagement process that the whole nomination process was actually.
Right.
Typically, though,
go ahead.
When they have a primary and a caucus in the same state, the caucus is primarily to elect delegates that go to the convention, right? And that's why that's a different matter. The actual delegates that are going to go to the convention, I'm okay with you having to have a registered Democrat or whatever go to the convention or whatnot. My point is
that's the same thing with that's how our primaries work. Our primaries we vote and then we send delegates to convention.
No.
That because Bernie won the caucus. But like a week ago, a few days ago, they had the Washington state primary, and Hillary Clinton won. They used that in that article to show that Hillary Clinton has an advantage in primaries and Bernie just wins caucuses. And it's just going into a rant here. They're not using numbers the way they did 4 years ago. Maybe it's because people expect more 538 and Nate Silver now. They expect them to make predictions earlier, and you don't have as good data earlier than you would have if you just waited for more data to come in. But in place of the lack of data that they have, they're just using punditry. The same punditry that they ranted about last cycle, that pundits are dumb, they just go by their gut feelings and they go by their instincts and they don't have data to back up their arguments. They're just doing that themselves now. Nate Silver just tweeted out a few hours ago that if every state was an open primary with same-day registration, Hillary Clinton would win and win larger than she is now. He
That is
said
so ridiculous
no
considering.
data to back it up at all. He
Hold on, let
said
me back
that
it up before we get on that one though. I
he,
was gonna say what I was talking about with the primary is that when you have both a primary and a caucus, the caucus is for the delegates, but the primary is still paid for by the state. That's what I was saying. If it's paid for by the state, then it should be open to
But
everybody.
the primary doesn't count, so it doesn't matter. Like if you have a caucus and a primary in a state, right? Like so Washington, the primary, why they're voting again for those candidates in the primary, I don't know, Richard, if you have anything to share on that, but it doesn't count for anything.
Yeah, it doesn't get like
So
how it works is that because of how the party was set up, it was a mostly internal decision, but there was the Democratic and Republican Party that were involved in deciding how we were going to do our elections this year, and it was possible that we were just going to do everything on a primary, or that both sides were going to hold caucuses. Republicans opted against the caucus, so that meant we were going to have a primary, and Democrats still wanted to hold on to the caucus, and so. In order to do that, the Republicans still had to have the primary ballot, but the Democratic Party required that the Democratic names go out on the ballot also, and so they sent out all of these primary ballots to people that registered Democrat, voted Democrat, participated in the caucus, or just didn't at all. Which to me is one of the issues I have is about while we're paying for it and while we're funding it,
that's
why
what
are
I
we
assumed
sending
it was, because it was like
it's not going to count.
Donald Trump had a primary and that one was scheduled, but then like there was this other secret Democratic primary, even though the caucus already happened. So I assumed it was like, oh, they're apparent for some reason they just had Democratic names on this Republican primary ballot, for some odd reason. But yeah.
Okay, so that might be something in particular with that particular state, because that's not how it works down here. Like that actual primary decides the actual number of delegates, and the caucus is just which delegates actually go, but the number doesn't change.
Yeah, and that's part of the mess is that we have such different things.
That's a hodgepodge then.
Even when we use the same words, they mean different things in different states.
Definitely. Even just looking at the different ones, like I just can't even keep up with the different caucuses and how they're just various differences across the board. It'd be great if we had a little more uniformity, but hey, this wouldn't be the good old USA if we were uniform about anything. So, okay, so the room wants to hear about...
One last thing. I just want to say as a final rant, Nate Silver, if you really think that if there was an actual primary instead of a caucus and Hillary Clinton would win that caucus, if you think that if every state was an open primary with same-day registration, that Bernie would not have won by large margins Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York, I have a very large bridge in the deserts of New Mexico I'd like to sell you, because that makes no sense. And there is no way you can prove with data that if there was an open primary in every state in the Democratic primary process, that Bernie would lose by larger margins than he is now. That is hilarious.
Part of the problem with that, too, is it disregards the fact that the caucus happened. So everyone who had been organizing, the caucus happened. The delegates, you guys have had your convention in Washington, right, Richard?
Oh, well, we had county conventions, and then
the county conventions. You've had your county conventions, right?
Congressional CD caucuses where we picked the delegates to send. So everybody this week just basically checked out.
So you've had all these layers of the process, especially if we're talking about a lot of people are new voters, right, or they haven't really been engaged in the process before. People are probably like, what do you mean we vote? It's confusing, but it doesn't count. So Nate Silver and everybody else, that's not proof of anything, because we have your media blackout. You don't have people, actively getting out the vote. There are all these other factors that go into it that just these straight random numbers that they try to pull out just don't muster up to. So, moving on. The room wants to talk about debate.
Before we move on, I'm going to say,
debate.
Come on, let me give one comment in on. We'll get to the debate. I was going to say it is my opinion that based off of other measures and with all the suppression and possible election fraud that's been going on, that even with the closed primary system, he's likely only 50 or so delegates behind Hillary Clinton. So trying to base any of these results as like it's some sort of referendum or something that you can really have a real analysis on as a real representation of how people have voted, with the results being, what they are, is spurious at best. It's not a good argument. I think that he should just throw all that stuff away. And then, based on his own data that he does have, he makes conclusions that don't make any sense either. When we see Bernie Sanders winning independents by 70 and 80%, but somehow if it's open primary, he would not win these independents and somehow lose these independents, and Hillary, who's doing much worse than him, is somehow going to do much better.
Remember, they're
I don't
not
know.
true independents.
Oh yeah, that not true independent was garbage.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. Moving along. Debate. Bernie and Trump. Charity debate. Young Turks say they got $1 million on it.
The tyrant king of Queens versus the brawler from Brooklyn. Let's get the WrestleMania titles going. Let's do it.
I love it. So, I mean, it's fascinating, right? Hillary Clinton once again, she's refusing to debate Bernie Sanders. Back in February, where there was all the brouhaha over more debates before O'Malley, basically the week O'Malley dropped out, they agreed to add 4 more debates in, a debate a month. That was when MSNBC tried to throw in that extra debate ahead of New Hampshire because Hillary was down. Then all of a sudden they had to negotiate because that was a debate and it wasn't sanctioned by the DNC. So they had to go through with getting that one sanctioned, and then they were to add 4 in. So, 3 more in addition to that one. So there was the one that was happening in Flint. Then she didn't want to debate in New York, but they finally had the debate in New York. And now there was supposed to be another debate ahead of the June primaries, and she has refused because she's a nominee. She doesn't need to debate him. She's already won in her mind. Never mind the fact that Bill and other people, Dolores Huerta and others, are out in California stumping for her, but she's already won. So she doesn't want to debate him. She has no desire. So Trump throws it out there, and there's been conflicting reports all day, but it seems like they're actually talking seriously about a Trump Bernie. The campaigns are actually talking. You have your various Democrat loyalists who are upset at the possibility of Bernie Sanders debating Donald Trump because it legitimizes him. If he's the presumptive nominee, why shouldn't Bernie? I mean, what is there actually a case for Bernie Sanders not to debate him?
Yeah, I think there's a case. And it's not from Bernie Sanders' perspective, it's from Hillary Clinton's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a situation where Bernie Sanders is debating Donald Trump and she's left out, it almost seems weird that the presumptive nominee isn't participating in the debate. But if she were to get in there, odds are she wouldn't do very well when you see how close she is to Donald Trump and how far away Sanders is from both of them. She doesn't want that spread to be as visible as it would be if she was on stage with both of them at the same time. And she's already started to backtrack on the progressive cloak that she put on for the primary. She's already starting to backtrack from those positions. I think when she did climate change, she already said, well, we're taking climate change, we're taking that whole initiative. We got no legislation on that. We're taking that all off, and we're not going to do anything about it. But supposedly she's progressive and understands that climate change is a big issue and we have to do something.
Also,
it's just all over the place.
The other topic you mentioned we might talk about tonight if we have time is that one of the people I know in the campaign talked about this is the possibility that they knew the IG report was coming out ahead of time, so they were never going to any debate at any point or in the next recent like going forward in the next couple of weeks. If there's a debate, they're not accepting it, and when the Clintons stick to a script, they stick with it. So the thing about Bernie is that because it's so much of it is run by him himself, he can be unpredictable and just say, I'll do this debate with Trump. Like, you can imagine if Clinton was if the shoe was on the other foot with Clinton, and there was a possibility to debate with Clinton before the general election, this would never happen because they're too slow to react to things like this. Bernie's Twitter responded within minutes of the question being asked on Jimmy Kimmel, and then when he said when they said okay maybe for charity, they already had a response. Like, whatever they had to do, they were willing to just go back and forth with Trump to do this. Meanwhile, the Clintons have to worry about.
It's like BET during the Billboard Awards already had its Prince tweet ready to go. Like, yeah, we saw that. We got you. Yeah, Bernie's team is definitely Bernie's Twitter team. Shout out to the Twitter folks who run on Bernie's account. They're on it. I mean, you're right because as soon as I saw game on, I said, wait a minute, because I saw it on I saw someone had shared it to Facebook, and I had to look because people share tweets all the time that aren't real. I had to go look at the timeline, and I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? Game on, and then because there have been several tweets actually. There's another one today about the real Donald Trump. He tweeted him today, said, I'm glad that we're talking about debating. I think when you're talking about who, especially going into California, not just going into California, but going into the convention, who is the stronger candidate for the fall for the general election. If Bernie Sanders could come out like he did in Miami, the Miami debate, that was a very strong debate on his behalf. And I think that if he's doing some debate prep, hint, hint, if anybody affiliated with the campaign is paying attention, he needs to do some serious debate prep. None of that playing around like with the New York debate, because this is serious. If this does actually happen, this is very telling. And I don't really care about Hillary Clinton, her campaign's tears over this.
The
Someone
establishment
said
tears.
earlier that no one should debate Trump until they are the nominee. Why? What rule is there? What's going to happen to Bernie Sanders if he doesn't? If it's not a sanctioned debate, they won't let him participate in any more debates. Well, guess what? There are no more. Because why? Hillary's refusing to participate in the last DNC sanctioned approved debate. So no, she has abdicated any right to complain.
And Bernie
What
wanted
do
to do
you
this
guys
a
think,
year ago.
Richard?
Bernie wanted to debate Republicans on the
Yes.
side like last summer. He was all for this.
Yes.
And all the missteps he's had in the debates, I have noticed he has gotten better. He has his debate skill when he knows the issues he wants to talk about, he gets on a lot more than he did like the CNN one back in October. He's gotten a lot better, and going back to the
He
Clintons
has
here,
improved. That is true.
they do not. If they knew about this report coming out on their emails, she has never handled the email question well. Like the email question and the transcript questions are questions that trip her up in the debates every time.
Well, when you have Hillary fans like Andrea Mitchell and George Stephanopoulos, right, saying that the report is damning, I don't care how Forbes or anybody else wants to try and spin it. When you have Andrea Mitchell talking about how it's disturbing because she is trying to say things one way, she's tried to say things, they've said things one way, and they be so quick to talk about, well, Colin Powell did. Colin Powell may have did certain things, but Colin Powell also did not do a lot of things that she is, she has done. And that's the other thing everyone also needs to know. Like, this wasn't just like targeting Hillary. This IG report looks at the Secretary of States that have been in office since the more digital age. Condoleezza Rice apparently did not use private email at all. John Kerry, and then I think she's the only one. Hillary's the only one that refused to sit down with them too. So this just raises so many, and they've already said they are not answering questions about this. So you're possibly right, Solomon. If this could have been possibly part of the reason for not wanting to do a debate. So I think that, but this becomes fodder though, right, for Trump. Like the problem is that everything she did, Trump is a jerk, right? And he has lived his life in the public eye like in a very different way than Hillary Clinton has as a reality TV star. So he doesn't really care. And it seems like the people who support him, they don't really care that he's flawed, that he has issues, and he has however many failed marriages and stuff like that. Like, they don't care about that.
I think the same can be said about Hillary Clinton, though. Like, because if you talk to Hillary Clinton supporters, they're completely eating up the spin that they put out at first about how this is all a lie, this is all three Pinocchios and all that.
I agree, but I think the difference
But her base is smaller than Trump's base, though. That's the thing.
That's one, her base is smaller. Two, particularly since the Republicans, they're not outright opposing him. Like, remember, they were throwing hissy fits the first few days. And now the language is toned down so much towards him, right? And they're also hoping they can beef up Congress and stuff so they can work around him if they need to. But But with her, the difference I would say is that you're right, that they do try to, the diehards, right? The problem is a lot of people have voted for her, but they're not necessarily her base. And you have people now, when you go back and talk to folks, if I only knew this about Bernie before I voted, you know what I'm saying? So there are quite a few people who have buyer's remorse right now too, who have already voted for her. So they act like, okay, she has all these people who voted for her, but that's because you people control the media. You shut out any type of real exchange of ideas and information in this primary cycle, and y'all have you've rolled out basically every single major Democrat that who's anybody to tell about how Bernie Sanders hates black people, Bernie Sanders hates women, and Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. So they spent all this time creating this persona, and it's taking people all this time to learn about him. Yeah, I don't know that a lot of people are so like, yeah, Hillary. The really diehards, her diehard base is a lot smaller than the Trump base, and I don't think that the difference with the way she hides from information, she hides from stuff. She doesn't want to address it. She talks around it. We're over 100 days from I'll look into the transcripts, right? Now this IG report thing comes up. And the problem is, I saw earlier that one of her former aides, also an attorney, is moving to, I saw that her depositions, the videos of her depositions have been sealed, are going to be sealed. And then there was something else happening, and I just lost the thought. Let me see if I'll find it. But there's a shroud of secrecy around her.
Yeah, they sealed all documents, not just for that specific one, but
right, not just for that. It's almost all documents. So there's a shroud of secrecy around her that I think gives a lot of people cause to pause. And even if ultimately, because let's also be clear, the email thing and the FBI thing, not the FBI, the IG report and the FBI investigation are completely separate, and they're looking at completely different issues, right? The email, the IG report was looking at, the records keeping, the violations of the Federal Records Act. The FBI issue is looking more at, the cybersecurity, the
and then there's the judicial watch for the FOIA requests, which is also
exactly.
a separate thing.
And that's and then you have the third thing there. So I just think that this is just, why would we want to start a new era in our democracy with this hanging over it? Like, I mean, I don't get people, but back to the debate, like, so I do agree with you guys. Like, with all this stuff going on and it's really heating up, I don't know, maybe she didn't want to expose herself because she doesn't like answering questions that she can't get out of.
She doesn't. One, she wouldn't be able to take. She doesn't handle well just the moderators asking her that question. Imagine answering that question with Bernie or Trump or both on the stage, with who being able to immediately eviscerate whatever answer she gives. That is not something Hillary Clinton would ever want to expose herself to.
Yeah,
I mean,
I just want to real quickly that her defense of what she did with the emails, that, well, it wasn't illegal, basically, is what the response to the IG report is. Nothing in the IG report was illegal, which they weren't looking for in the first place, but they were just documenting what was happening. That totally undermines her whole plea towards getting Donald Trump to release his taxes, in that that's not a law that he has to do it. She just thinks that that's something somebody should do if they want to be president. Well, something else somebody should probably do if they want to be president is cooperate with IG investigations, cooperate with the FBI, and not refuse to engage in the interviews and so on and so forth. And so that would be very starkly presented on stage in a debate format. That you want people to meet certain standards to be president that aren't legal standards, but then you're going to ignore these other standards about when you were doing a job as a government official that was pretty important that you use to point at as experience.
But remember, her original defense was, I have done nothing wrong. Everything I did was above board. It was approved. That was her original defense.
And that's you can hear the devastation. When Andrew Mitchell says it's devastating, it's devastating. Like, Andrew Mitchell was devastated when she was on Morning Joe. It was either this morning or yesterday morning. And no, I think it was yesterday morning. But she's clearly devastated. She's clearly shaken because it's not exactly true, right? Like, you have Hillary Clinton saying, okay, I did this, we follow whatever protocol, I did nothing different. No, you did do something different. You built your own private. I mean, there are all these different layers. It took her almost 2 years to turn over records from during her tenure. That's impermissible. Like, and that was the issue in the IG report. Marcus from the chat room says, did she change her defense? There was no info that was born classified, which is also like a lie according to the IG report. Yeah, I mean, there's just it's all this Clintonian speak, and people can say, you know, oh, that doesn't really matter. To me, it does matter. Someone's ethical core. I mean, what are you, if you're not honest about something that's supposedly so simple and not that big of a deal as this, what else do you lie about? And how can we trust you? And no, that doesn't make me a sexist or a bad feminist for asking that question. That's a real question. And if we had a woman of color in this position, she would be forced to go sit down somewhere immediately. So the fact that we're like tolerating this stuff from Hillary Clinton, we wouldn't tolerate it from anyone
like the
else
secretary
right now.
during the Benghazi scandal. Someone had to take the fall, and what was, I don't even remember her name now, which I feel bad about, but when they yes, Susan Rice. She is the one who took the fall for that whole thing immediately when they sent out the wrong information that it was a video about that caused the attack and not a separate terrorist attack. But she's the one who's been able, that Hillary Clinton's the one who's been able to play I'm the victim here this whole time. And the fact that is separate from this, the Guccifer guy who just took a guilty plea deal, she better hope he has absolutely nothing in that. When he said I have information and took this this plea deal to help the investigation, that there is there was never any leak, because that IG report also said there were 2 instances where whatever IT guy was running that server, who didn't even work 24 hours and was off half the day, turned off the server twice because he was afraid he was seeing attacks on the server. And if Guccifer can prove that there were multiple attacks, the hacker, if he can prove it, then the whole thing's over. There's no way that they can't say that it wasn't compromised and information that should have been out there got out there to allies, enemies, whoever.
Yeah, and that would go a long way towards proving if they wanted to bring like a negligence charge of some sort.
Which is probably
I still don't. I know I got asked this. Like, I talked with Michael Salomone on his podcast last night, and we were talking about this. He was asking, like, as a lawyer, what did I think legally would happen to her? I honestly do not think that anything's going to happen to her legally. Like, I don't foresee charges, because even when you talk about a violation of the Federal Records Act, it's not like we're talking about like jail time and like, I mean, she's not like she's going up the river for a long time or anything here, but I mean, we do have very serious issues, and I do think that in terms of considering someone for president, it's very relevant in terms of their judgment and their ethical core. In terms of whether or not she's going to get charged for all this other stuff, I mean, we can run any number of scenarios where something could happen. Will it happen? More than likely not. I cannot see a judge allowing. I mean, I just don't see it. Stranger things have happened, though.
Well, to me, it seems like it's a trick in order to frame the situation where the bar is it's not illegal, and it's like that shouldn't be the bar for
the FBI has evidence for almost an indictment, but doesn't quite indict. That's still pretty bad.
It's damning evidence. Like, I agree, and this is the game the Clintons and others play. This is why they have so many they are lawyers. Their whole squad, they have a bunch of lawyers around them. It's like a bunch of her different assistants and staffers and stuff have been lawyers. Like, they are lawyered up. and I agree, though, that there is a difference between what is legally permissible. We've had this discussion before. What is legal and what is ethical, what should be morally acceptable, are not always the same thing. You know, there are a lot of things that are legal, but they should not be considered morally acceptable, and they definitely should not be considered traits, characteristics, or even activities that we would want in someone who's leading, you know, the supposed free world. Like, I don't know. Like, there are many faults I have with Hillary Clinton, and this not being honest, I made a mistake, and moving on. She kind of said that, but she said so many other things too that I kind of made a mistake. It's very disingenuous.
Well, here's my thing, though. It's not even about legality, right? Like, you can break the law and nobody enforces it on you, and it doesn't mean you didn't break the law. It just means they didn't choose to follow through with enforcement action against you, right? So that's two different things. Like even I know I'm moving the bar up for the criminality of it. I'm just saying, even if she did break the law, they don't have to enforce the law. They can choose what to enforce on
Well,
her.
that's with anything, and like even if she broke, like she right, exactly right, because they could choose to ignore something that could be higher. I don't even know. Like I said, it just depends upon what they ultimately find. Because if anything, they're looking at things that could be considered a misdemeanor. But I agree with you guys that the legality, whether it's legal or illegal, I hate that defense from people. Whether it's morally acceptable is what we should be talking about. When we're talking about in this case of
Potential president.
someone running for president, like that's huge. And in the chat, someone was saying that her new defense now is that she didn't know about email protocols at the time.
Oh no!
This woman concerns me. You don't know about email protocols?
Anybody that works in the State Department.
So you didn't know about email protocols, yet you were repeatedly warned that you were violating certain protocols, and you didn't think you should do something different there? That don't even make any sense. And why people are, sucking that up and like, oh yeah, see? And Colin Powell did it too. I commend Colin Powell for making another copy of everything. Because you can't trust them bushes.
You know?
We know why Colin Powell did what he did. We know why he did what he did. He had to cover his butt because they was trying to get him with the okie doke.
And it's hilarious how Hillary is trying to throw him under the bus to protect her skin. And just think how easy that would be for someone like Trump to take advantage of. Like, look at what Hillary's doing to this, like, the most prominently loved black Republican in the country. And she's trying to throw him under the bus when he was building the email system that the State Department was using that she abused.
Right, and that's the other thing they were saying. Like those protocols were not. Some of those things were not established when he was there. Some of that stuff was established under her. So the excuse that I didn't know, I don't buy that. I don't buy it at all. I don't know. It also, I guess, is a generation gap because I cannot fathom even 6 years ago people not using email to do work. So, yeah, I don't know. But
Condoleezza Rice I don't know what she was doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they said Condoleezza Rice did not use email.
Yeah.
So I guess she wrote memos a lot, typed and wrote memos.
No email at all.
Yeah. Well, Colin Powell was the first one to start the State Department using email.
Yeah, because Margaret Thatcher did not, and then she did. Colin Powell did, but then Condoleezza Rice, they're saying, didn't use private or official email. So I'm guessing she must have been old school printing stuff out. Like I really don't know. But they interviewed all of them except for Hillary. Hillary did not participate, and I think that's a problem too. You're just going to refuse not to participate in matters that you don't agree with? That's not how you lead. Like, that's just such a problem. It's just a problem on so many levels. But that's enough of her and her for damn emails. Are you guys going to keep attacking Hillary Clinton at the nomination? I'm not attacking Hillary Clinton. I mean, if you're in the public eye and you do things, it will be critiqued. People do need to be critiqued. So if and when that Hillary Clinton becomes the nominee, yes, she will continue to be criticized. If and when she were to become president, she will continue to be criticized. Why? Because this is not some, okay, we're all in this together, go blue, go dim club over here. If that's what you're looking for, you came to the wrong place.
If Bernie somehow becomes the nominee.
If and when Bernie becomes the nominee, he will continue to be criticized as well. I mean, like.
I do want us to do one thing though. If something happens and Bernie gets the nomination, I want us to start the hashtag Unite Blue LOL. Can we just do that? Can we just do that to all the people? I need that to happen.
Oh, it would be nice. That would feel nice.
The level of salt on Twitter would be so high. It would be great.
Oh yeah, I would hit him with you're gonna have to hold that.
Come on, guys, Unite Blue LOL. Come on.
Yeah, I understand the concern that people who support Secretary Clinton, I understand the paranoia and the fear that people have at the idea of a Trump presidency. Quite honestly, I still believe it's a lot better than Cruz, but that's a whole other conversation. But I'm not, just because you're afraid of Trump does not mean that I'm going to say um, nothing about what Hillary Clinton does or says. There are things that she does or that she says that I find that are wrong. There are things that people who support her say that I feel are wrong. The same way, and you all who support Bernie Sanders know, I've called out people amongst our own supporters as well as our candidate for things I didn't agree with either. I'm not going to bite my tongue because you have some need to create some sanitized version of reality because you want to prop up an imperfect candidate. If she has that many flaws, she should not be running. Am I concerned that people say you can't criticize her because she's the first woman president? My response to people like that is, supposedly feminists want to be treated the same as men, and yet when we're treated like men, we cry because people are being mean to us. No, that mentality sets us back, I don't know, 50, 60 years. So no, she gets it, and if you don't like her being talked about, you better go holler at people on your team because your candidate has a lot of issues. She has a lot of issues.
This is not.
And
I was
this
gonna say
ain't a
this
beauty
is not
pageant.
a. Yeah. It's not a beauty pageant, and this is not a sports team or something like that where if you didn't get a ref didn't call something and you saw that they did it. It's like, oh, thank goodness they didn't call that. It's like, no, this is not what this is. That's not what this is. Because if she gets up there and she's deeply flawed, you have to understand that the light that you see her in is not the same light that everybody sees her in, and everybody's voting. So if she gets up there and she represents progressivism or the left ideology and she's absolutely terrible, what do you think that does for us 2018, 2020, 2022? That anybody that's not deeply involved in politics, that's really going to hurt us with those people that are in between. That's what makes the Republican Party viable, because we have terrible candidates or candidates that get up there and they don't govern very well. Like prosperity and things of that nature, those things are self-reinforcing. So if you get in there and times are prosperous and everybody feels it, they're going to attribute that to you. If you get in there and times are not prosperous, you don't do very much, or people have this sense that nothing has changed and you promise change, or things are still rigged and all of that nonsense, anything negative, it's going to be put on you. And it's not just going to be put on you, it's going to be put on whatever ideology that you're associated with. And those people are now not going to vote for Democrat when we really need them to vote Democrat, or whatever the left spectrum may be. They're gonna picture Hillary Clinton and say, well, if that's the left, I'm not going to vote for that. It's like, well, she really isn't the left, and we don't need her to portray that. We don't need her to
Right.
represent that. We need to have people representing what the left really is. And once you started kind of like putting your own ideology to the side and saying, I just have to support this because it's the left, you're really doing damage more than you're winning. Look at what happened under Barack Obama. We lost all across the nation. Democrats have been just getting destroyed everywhere. And that is basically because of that centrist rule. We can't keep voting for that and expect people in the middle to be able to keep looking at our candidates supposedly representing the left in good light when they rule terribly.
That's a great point. And with that, we have come to the end of our show for tonight. Just want to let everybody know that Ben will not be here next week, but we will have guest hosts. No, you will not have to look at me all week long, I promise. But we will be filling in with guest hosts throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check me out Tuesdays, 8 p.m. The Way, right here. And we have Project Sandy back next Thursday, 7 to 9. I'm going to let you guys get in some final closing thoughts, and then we're going to be out.
Confirmed, Bernie Sanders will be co-hosting the Benjamin Dixon Show next week. Confirmed.
Yeah, I'll be around. Maybe I'll get in on some of that guest hosting, and I'll be definitely around for Project Sanity on Thursday, 7 to 9. Catch me Progressive Green on Twitter if you want to just stay up to date with what I'm looking at. And Nis will be back next week. He should be back, and we have a great show lined up about Democratic narratives. So should be very interesting.
once again, on Monday, I believe we'll be doing an interview with Richard Charnan. He's a mathematician. I just want to kind of go over some of the data that I was speaking about with voting irregularities and comparing it to the exit polls and kind of just running some analysis on that and explaining to people what that means. So hopefully we'll have him on Monday at 7 o'clock Central. We'll just have him for a short show, so that'll be another special edition by Nick. Just be looking out for it. And remember what I just said about ideology and how other people see stuff. That's important.
That's awesome to hear, Nick. I've actually personally been looking forward to something like that. So knowing that you guys are,
Very cool.
I'll be tuned in for
Did
sure.
not know. Nick is full of surprises. Solomon, final thoughts. You already gave yours.
Just say glad to be back on, and hope maybe I can be a guest on next week as well. I hope we get my spot ready so I can have my cam that next time. But it was really fun, and everyone should join me in hunting down YouTube clips for after the show, because apparently Rachel Maddow had a near nervous breakdown about this Bernie debate thing with Trump, and apparently it was amazing to watch. So I need to go find this.
I'm so over her.
She's too treacherous for my liking.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is so much fun hanging out with my brothers, my PA brothers. Yeah. So just everybody, like, regardless of who you're supporting, stay active, stay engaged, and continue to really build and reach out to people in your area, because you don't just have the presidential election. Yes, it is important, but we have congressional races, we have state and local races, you have city council, you have county commissioners. There's so many levels to the process that we really need to be paying attention to. And if you're feeling the itch, if it's too late for this cycle, consider running in 2018. We need good people in office who are thinking about, representing the people first and foremost, and not necessarily kissing up to the donor class. So appreciate you guys. Happy Thursday. Good night. Andrew Mitchell, you said Rachel Maddow was freaking out, huh?
Treacherous.
Yeah, Reddit said she looked like she was about to have kittens. So
possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com.
Fine.
BPD Show and support.
All night or do some work.